Professor Kira Blackwood walked into her classroom at Galactic Imperial University with her usual confident stride. The large lecture hall was filled with students from dozens of different alien species. Some had blue skin and 4 arms, others had tentacles instead of legs, and a few looked almost like giant insects. This was her favorite class to teach, Extinct Civilizations of the Galaxy. She pressed a button on her desk and a massive holographic display lit up behind her. The image showed a beautiful blue and green planet covered in swirling white clouds. Several students leaned forward in their seats, curious about what they were seeing. "Good morning, everyone," Professor Blackwood said, her voice carrying easily through the hall. "Today we will study one of the most tragic examples of species self-destruction in galactic history. This planet was called Earth." The hologram shifted to show the same planet, but now it looked completely different. The blue oceans had turned brown and murky. The green continents were covered in gray ash and glowing red spots that pulsed like infected wounds. No white clouds danced in the sky, instead, thick black smoke covered everything. A student with purple scales raised one of her 6 hands. "Professor, what happened to make it look so terrible?" "Excellent question, Vera," Professor Blackwood replied. She clicked another button and images of strange bipedal creatures appeared in the hologram. They walked upright on 2 legs, had pale skin in various shades, and hair on top of their heads in different colors. These creatures were called humans. They were the dominant species on Earth for thousands of years. The students stared at the images with fascination. The humans in the hologram looked so simple compared to the complex alien species in the classroom. They had only 2 arms, 2 legs, and their eyes were positioned in the front of their heads instead of on the sides or top. Humans were a primitive and violent species, Professor Blackwood continued. They could not control their aggressive nature. They fought constant wars against each other, divided themselves by the color of their skin, and argued over invisible lines they drew on maps called borders. More images flashed across the hologram showing massive explosions, burning cities, and groups of humans fighting each other with various weapons. The alien students watched in horror and disgust. 200 years ago, the humans finally destroyed themselves completely, the professor said with a shake of her head. They created powerful weapons called nuclear bombs and used them against their own planet. The radiation poisoned their air and water. The explosions created massive fires that burned for years. Eventually, every single human died, and their planet became uninhabitable. A student that looked like a walking tree rustled his leaves sadly. "Did any of them try to escape to other planets?" "No, Marcus," Professor Blackwood answered. "Humans were too primitive for space travel. They never developed the technology to leave their planet. They were trapped there when their own violence destroyed them. It serves as a perfect example of why species must learn to live in peace." The hologram now showed empty human cities covered in dust and debris. Skeletons scattered among the ruins told the story of a species that had vanished forever. The professor let the image hang in the air for a moment to let the lesson sink in. "This is why the Galactic Council works so hard to prevent wars between our species," she said. "We have seen what happens when intelligence is paired with violence instead of wisdom. The humans are completely extinct now. Not a single one survived their planet's destruction." In the back row of the lecture hall, a young man named Thomas Wright sat quietly in his seat. He had been listening to every word, but something felt strange to him. All semester long, he had felt different from his classmates, though he could never explain why. His adoptive parents, James and Mary Miller, had found him as a baby on an abandoned spaceship and raised him with love and care. But they had always been vague about where he came from originally. Thomas looked at his hands, then at the images of humans on the hologram. The similarity was striking. The humans had the same number of fingers he did, the same basic body shape, even similar facial features. His heart began to beat faster as a terrible thought entered his mind. The genetic structure of humans was quite simple compared to most galactic species, Professor Blackwood was saying. They had basic DNA patterns and primitive brain development. Their technology was limited to crude machines and simple computers. In many ways, they were like children who found dangerous toys. Thomas felt sweat forming on his forehead. He looked around the classroom at his alien classmates, then back at the hologram showing human faces. The resemblance was undeniable. Every feature he saw in those extinct creatures matched his own appearance exactly. The professor clicked to a final image showing Earth as it looked today, a dead, empty world where nothing could survive. "And so ends the story of humanity," she said. "A species that chose violence over peace, war over cooperation, and ultimately extinction over survival. Are there any questions?" Thomas's hand began to shake as he slowly raised it into the air. The professor noticed him and nodded in his direction. Several students turned to look at him, waiting for his question. His mouth felt dry and his voice came out as barely more than a whisper, but in the silence of the lecture hall, everyone could hear him clearly. "Professor," Thomas said, his words hanging in the air like a bomb waiting to explode, "if all the humans are extinct and none of them survived, then what planet am I from?" The lecture hall fell completely silent. The silence in the lecture hall stretched on for what felt like forever. Professor Blackwood stared at Thomas Wright with wide eyes, her mouth slightly open in shock. Around the room, alien students turned in their seats to get a better look at the young man who had just asked the impossible question. Thomas felt his face burning red as everyone stared at him. He wanted to disappear into his chair, but it was too late to take back his words. The question hung in the air like a dangerous secret that had finally been spoken aloud. Professor Blackwood cleared her throat and tried to regain her composure. That's an interesting observation, Thomas," she said slowly. "But surely you must be from one of the human-like species. There are several races in the galaxy that share similar physical characteristics." But even as she said it, the professor's scientific mind was working. She had been studying extinct civilizations for over 20 years, and she knew exactly what humans looked like. Thomas Wright looked exactly like the humans in her historical files. Not similar, identical. "Class dismissed," Professor Blackwood said suddenly. "Please read Chapter 12 for next week." The alien students packed their things and filed out of the room, whispering excitedly among themselves about what they had just witnessed. Thomas remained in his seat, not sure what to do next. His hands were still shaking. "Thomas, please stay behind," the professor said. "We need to talk." Once the last student had left, Professor Blackwood activated a privacy screen around the classroom. The walls shimmered slightly as the device blocked anyone from listening to their conversation. "Thomas," she said gently, walking closer to him. "Tell me about your early life. Where do you remember growing up?" Thomas took a deep breath. "I don't remember anything before I was about 3 years old. My parents, James and Mary Miller, found me on an abandoned transport ship when I was just a baby. They adopted me and raised me as their own son." Professor Blackwood nodded thoughtfully. "Did they ever tell you anything about the ship where they found you? What it looked like, where it came from?" "They always said the records were damaged beyond repair," Thomas replied. "They told me it didn't matter where I came from because they loved me just the same. I never questioned it because they were such good parents." The professor pulled out a small medical scanner from her desk drawer. "Thomas, I need to run some tests. Would that be okay with you?" Thomas nodded nervously. Professor Blackwood ran the scanner over his body, starting with his head and moving down to his feet. As the data appeared on her tablet, her expression grew more concerned with each passing second. "Your bone density, your brain structure, your genetic markers," she said quietly. "Thomas, according to these readings, you are definitely human. 100% human." Thomas felt the room spinning around him. "But that's impossible, right? You just told the whole class that humans are extinct." Professor Blackwood sat down in the chair next to him. "That's what all the official records say. That's what I've been teaching for 15 years. But Thomas, science doesn't lie. These test results are clear." Over the next 3 days, Professor Blackwood threw herself into research like never before. She used her high-level academic credentials to access restricted historical archives that most people couldn't see. She stayed up all night reading through classified documents and sealed reports about Earth's final days. What she found disturbed her greatly. There were huge gaps in the historical record about Earth's destruction. Important documents were missing. Witness testimonies had been sealed under maximum security classifications that would last for another 100 years. Most strange of all, there were transportation records showing hundreds of ships leaving Earth in the months before its alleged self-destruction. Meanwhile, Thomas struggled with his new reality. Word had spread quickly through the university that there might be a living human student on campus. Some students avoided him completely, afraid of what he might represent. Others stared at him like he was a dangerous animal that might attack at any moment. His adoptive parents, James and Mary Miller, came to visit him after he called them in tears. They sat in his small dormitory room while he told them everything that had happened. "We always wondered if this day would come," Mary Miller said softly, taking Thomas's hand. "We hoped you could live a normal life without ever having to face these questions." "You knew?" Thomas asked in shock. "You knew I was human?" James Miller nodded sadly. "The ship where we found you had human writing on it. There were other human babies on board, but most didn't survive the journey. We took you to several doctors who confirmed what you were, but they all agreed to keep it secret. Why? Thomas asked. Why was it such a secret? Mary Miller exchanged a worried look with her husband. Because there were people looking for human survivors. People who wanted to make sure that none of you ever grew up to ask questions about what really happened to Earth. 3 days after Thomas's question in class, Professor Blackwood was called into a meeting with Dean Harrison, the head of the university. The dean was an imposing figure from the Altrian species, standing nearly 8 feet tall with silver skin and 3 eyes. Professor Blackwood, Dean Harrison said in his deep voice, I understand you've been conducting some unusual research lately. Research into topics that might be considered sensitive. I'm simply following the scientific evidence, she replied carefully. Some truths are better left buried, the dean said, his middle eye focusing intently on her. I trust you understand that certain political sensitivities are at stake here. It would be unfortunate if your career were to suffer because of misguided curiosity. Professor Blackwood felt a chill run down her spine. The threat was clear, even if it was politely worded. But she had already made her decision. The truth was too important to hide. 3 weeks had passed since Thomas asked his fateful question in Professor Blackwood's class. The university felt different now. Students whispered when he walked by, and some professors looked at him with suspicious eyes. Thomas tried to focus on his studies, but everything felt wrong. He was no longer just another student, he was a mystery that made everyone uncomfortable. Late one evening, Thomas was alone in his dormitory room when his personal communicator beeped with an incoming message. The sender was listed as unknown, which was strange because the university's communication system usually blocked anonymous messages. He opened the message and read, The Phoenix Diner, Sector 7, midnight. Come alone if you want answers about who you really are. Thomas stared at the screen for a long time. This could be a trap. Dean Harrison had made it clear that asking questions about his origins was dangerous. But the message offered something Thomas desperately needed, answers. At 11:45 that night, Thomas made his way through the darker parts of the university district. Sector 7 was where the cheaper restaurants and shops were located, places that most university students avoided. The Phoenix Diner was a small, run-down establishment squeezed between a repair shop and a laundromat. Thomas pushed open the door and was hit by the smell of fried food and strong coffee. The diner was nearly empty except for a few late-night customers. In a corner booth sat a man who looked to be in his 50s, with graying hair and weathered skin. What shocked Thomas most was that the man looked completely human. The stranger looked up and gestured for Thomas to join him. Thomas walked over on unsteady legs and slid into the booth across from him. You must be Thomas Wright, the man said in a quiet voice. I'm Marcus Stone. I've been waiting a long time to meet someone like you. Thomas could barely speak. You're human too, aren't you? Marcus nodded grimly. One of about 50,000 who are still alive. We've been living in secret for 200 years, scattered across hidden colonies on the outer rim of the galaxy. Thomas felt like the world was spinning. 50,000? But Professor Blackwood said we were all extinct. Marcus pulled out a small device and activated it. A holographic image appeared showing a bustling settlement filled with people who all looked unmistakably human. Men, women, and children worked in gardens, built homes, and lived normal lives under an alien sky. This is New Haven Colony, Marcus explained. It's one of 12 hidden human settlements that survived Earth's destruction. We grow our own food, build our own cities, and raise our children far from the rest of galactic civilization. More images flashed across the hologram. Humans operating advanced farming equipment, children playing in schoolyards, families gathered around dinner tables. It looked like a thriving society. I don't understand, Thomas said. How is this possible? What happened to Earth? Marcus's expression grew dark. The official story about humans destroying themselves is a complete lie. We didn't destroy Earth through nuclear war. We were evacuated before the planet was deliberately bombed by a coalition of alien governments. Thomas felt sick to his stomach. That's impossible. Why would they do that? Because we were advancing too quickly, Marcus replied. Human technology and diplomacy were developing faster than anyone expected. Within 50 years, we had gone from primitive space travel to competing with species that had been spacefaring for thousands of years. Some alien governments saw us as a threat. Marcus showed him another holographic image, this one of massive alien warships in orbit around Earth, firing powerful energy weapons at the planet's surface. The evacuation was secret and rushed, Marcus continued. We managed to save about 200,000 people before the bombardment began. But most of the escape ships were attacked or sabotaged. Only a few thousand of us survived to reach the Outer Rim worlds. Thomas's hands were shaking. You're saying that aliens murdered billions of humans and then lied about it? Not all aliens, Marcus said. Many species had no idea what was happening. The conspiracy involved only the most powerful governments, the ones who controlled the historical records and the communication networks. Marcus explained how the cover-up worked. Official documents were falsified to make it look like humans had destroyed themselves. Any evidence of the evacuation was classified or destroyed. Survivors who tried to contact the outside galaxy simply disappeared. Your professor, Blackwood, has been asking dangerous questions, Marcus said. That's brought you to our attention. We've been monitoring communications from the university. There are others like me? Thomas asked. Other human children who were hidden? Marcus nodded sadly. Hundreds were scattered across the galaxy as babies, placed with alien families who would keep them safe. Most never learn what they really are. Those who ask too many questions tend to have accidents. Thomas thought about Dean Harrison's threat to Professor Blackwood. They're going to try to silence me, aren't they? They've already started, Marcus replied. 3 other human students were arrested this week on different worlds. They're charged with identity fraud, but they'll disappear into maximum security prisons. Marcus leaned forward across the table. Thomas, your question in that classroom has changed everything. For the first time in 2 centuries, someone has publicly challenged the official story in a way that can't be ignored. The video of your question has been spreading across underground networks. What do you want me to do? Thomas asked. Help us reveal the truth, Marcus said. We've been waiting for the right moment to expose the conspiracy. Your existence, combined with Professor Blackwood's research, gives us the opportunity we need. Marcus showed him images of communication equipment, hidden archives, and most importantly, other human survivors ready to come forward. But Thomas, Marcus said seriously, once you agree to this, there's no going back. They'll try to kill you to keep their secret safe. Thomas looked at the holographic images of his people, humans living free on distant worlds, children who deserved to know their heritage, families who had been torn apart by lies. For the first time since asking his question in class, Thomas felt like he knew exactly what he had to do. Tell me what needs to happen, he said. Professor Blackwood knew she was being watched. For the past week, strange men in dark suits had been following her around campus. Her office had been searched twice, though nothing appeared to be missing. Her access to several restricted archives had been mysteriously revoked without explanation. But she couldn't stop digging for the truth. Working with Marcus Stone and his network of human survivors, she had uncovered evidence that made her sick to her stomach. The conspiracy was bigger and more terrible than she had ever imagined. In a hidden basement beneath an old warehouse in Sector 9, Professor Blackwood met with Thomas, Marcus, and several other human survivors. The room was filled with advanced computer equipment and holographic displays showing classified documents that had taken months to obtain. What I'm about to show you will change everything we thought we knew about human history, Professor Blackwood said, her voice shaking slightly. I've found the real records of what happened to Earth. She activated the main holographic display, and audio began playing. The voice belonged to Ambassador Vex Kane from the Centauri Coalition, one of the most powerful alien governments in the galaxy. The human problem has become critical, the recording said. Their technological advancement has exceeded all our projections. In 50 years, they've developed faster-than-light travel, advanced weapon systems, and most dangerously, diplomatic skills that threaten our established power structure. Thomas listened in horror as other alien voices joined the conversation. These were the leaders of multiple species, discussing humans like they were discussing an invasion of dangerous insects. Their population growth is out of control, said another voice. If we allow them to continue expanding, they'll outnumber us within 2 centuries. The psychological profiles are troubling, added a third speaker. Humans form emotional bonds across species lines. They're already building alliances with our enemies. Their ambassador convinced the Rigel Council to vote against our mining rights proposal. Professor Blackwood paused the recording. This meeting took place 6 months before Earth's destruction. They weren't afraid of human violence, they were afraid of human peacemaking. Marcus Stone clenched his fists as he listened. They saw us as competitors, not monsters. The professor played another recording, this one even more damning. It was a detailed plan called Operation Silent Dawn, outlining exactly how Earth would be destroyed while making it look like human self-destruction. Phase 1. Encourage existing human conflicts through weapons sales and propaganda, the plan read. Phase 2. Evacuate key human leaders and scientists to prevent total knowledge loss. Phase 3. Orbital bombardment disguised as nuclear warfare. Phase 4. Falsify historical records to support the self-destruction narrative. Thomas felt like he was going to be sick. They evacuated some humans on purpose. The smart ones, said Emma Clark, one of Marcus's top agents. Scientists, engineers, doctors, people whose knowledge was too valuable to lose completely. They were taken to secret research facilities and forced to work for alien governments. Emma had been investigating this aspect of the conspiracy for years. She showed them files of human scientists who had been kidnapped and forced to develop technology for their captors. Most had been told that they were the only survivors of Earth's destruction. My father was one of them, Emma said quietly. He spent 30 years developing new weapons for the Altrian military before he managed to escape and find our colonies. Professor Blackwood displayed the next piece of evidence, transportation records that had been sealed for 200 years. They showed hundreds of evacuation ships leaving Earth in the months before its destruction, but most of these ships had been attacked or sabotaged during their journey. They let some humans escape, but they made sure most wouldn't survive to tell the story, she explained. Out of 200,000 people who fled Earth, only about 10,000 reached safe locations. The most shocking revelation came when Professor Blackwood showed them communication records from the Galactic Council itself. Several council members had not only known about the plan but had actively participated in it. The current council president, Zara Voss, was a junior minister when this happened, she said. She personally signed the orders to destroy ships carrying human refugees. Thomas realized that the conspiracy went all the way to the top of galactic government. The people who were supposed to maintain peace between species had participated in genocide. Marcus showed them a list of names, other humans like Thomas who had been placed with alien families across the galaxy. There are at least 500 human children who grew up not knowing what they were, he said. But in the past month, 23 of them have been arrested or have simply disappeared. They're cleaning up loose ends, Emma said grimly. Your question in that classroom, Thomas, it spooked them. They're moving faster now to eliminate any evidence. Professor Blackwood had discovered something even more disturbing. Her investigation had revealed a systematic program to identify and eliminate humans who might surface in galactic society. There were agents in universities, hospitals, and government offices whose job was to watch for signs of human survivors. They've been planning this cover-up for 2 centuries, she said. Every alien child learns in school that humans destroyed themselves. It's become accepted fact across the entire galaxy. A young human woman named Sarah Miller entered the room with urgent news. She was one of Marcus's communication specialists who monitored galactic security networks. We have a big problem, she announced. Intelligence agencies from 6 different governments are coordinating a sweep operation. They are planning to arrest every suspected human survivor within the next 72 hours. Thomas felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. His simple question had triggered a galaxy-wide manhunt for his people. There's something else, Sarah continued. They're not just planning arrests. The security communications mentioned permanent solutions and final cleanup protocols. The room fell silent as everyone understood what that meant. They're planning to kill us all, Thomas said quietly. Marcus nodded grimly. We can't wait any longer. If we're going to reveal the truth, it has to be now. Thomas looked around at the faces of his people, scientists, farmers, fighters, and dreamers who had been living in fear for 200 years. They were depending on him to help them find justice. What do we need to do? Thomas asked. Expose everything, Professor Blackwood replied. Broadcast the evidence to every world in the galaxy before they can stop us. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had never seen anything like this before. Every major news network in the galaxy was broadcasting live as Thomas Wright stood at the speaker's podium in the center of the massive chamber. Behind him, Professor Blackwood and Marcus Stone flanked enormous holographic displays that showed evidence of the conspiracy. Thomas had never felt so nervous in his entire life. Representatives from hundreds of alien species filled the curved rows of seats around him. Some looked curious, others appeared angry, and a few seemed genuinely shocked by what they were seeing. My name is Thomas Wright, he began, his voice amplified throughout the chamber and broadcast to billions of viewers across the galaxy. 3 months ago, I was just a university student who asked a simple question. Today, I stand before you as living proof that everything you have been told about humanity is a lie. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Several representatives from the Centauri coalition stood up and began walking toward the exits, but galactic security officers blocked their path. Emma Clark had spent the past week coordinating with sympathetic council members to ensure that the guilty parties could not escape. For 200 years, you have been taught that humans destroyed themselves through violence and stupidity, Thomas continued. This is what really happened to my people. Professor Blackwood activated the first holographic display, showing the recorded conversations between alien leaders planning humanity's destruction. Ambassador Vex Kane's voice filled the chamber as he discussed the human problem and the need for permanent solutions. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Representatives who had never heard these recordings before gasped in shock. Some alien leaders tried to shout over the audio, claiming it was fake, but their protests were drowned out by the damning evidence. Marcus Stone stepped forward and activated another display showing images of the hidden human colonies. 50,000 humans survived the genocide, he announced. We have been living in secret on the outer rim worlds, keeping our children safe from those who wanted us extinct. The images showed thriving human settlements, families working together, children playing in schools, and communities that had rebuilt their civilization far from galactic society. It was undeniable proof that humanity had not only survived but flourished despite 2 centuries of hiding. Thomas felt stronger as he continued speaking. We did not destroy Earth. We were evacuated before our planet was deliberately bombed by a coalition of alien governments who feared our rapid advancement. Professor Blackwood displayed the classified military records showing alien warships in Earth's orbit, firing massive energy weapons at the planet's surface. The official reports clearly stated that the bombardment was designed to look like nuclear warfare while ensuring complete environmental destruction. They were not afraid of our violence, Thomas said, his voice growing more confident. They were afraid of our peacemaking. Humans were building alliances across species lines. We were solving diplomatic problems that had existed for centuries. We represented change, and change threatened their power. A representative from the Rigel Council stood up and addressed the chamber. If this evidence is authentic, then we have been unknowing participants in covering up the greatest crime in galactic history. But not everyone was convinced. Senator Korax from the Altrian government pointed an accusing finger at Thomas. How do we know this so-called human is not an elaborate fake? How do we know these recordings are real? Emma Clark had anticipated this challenge. She activated a third holographic display that showed real-time images from 12 different human colonies simultaneously. Thousands of humans appeared on the displays, all holding signs with the current date and time, proving that they were alive and well at that very moment. We are not extinct, Thomas declared. We are not myths or historical curiosities. We are your neighbors, your colleagues, and in some cases, your friends who have been forced to hide our true identity to survive. The most shocking revelation came when Professor Blackwood displayed a list of human children who had been scattered across the galaxy. The list included their current names, their adoptive families, and their locations on dozens of different worlds. There are over 800 humans living among you right now, she announced. Most of them don't even know what they are. They have been raised as members of other species, never knowing their true heritage. Thomas saw several council representatives looking uncomfortable as they realized that some of their own staff members or even family friends might be on that list. The chamber fell silent when Emma Clark stepped forward with the final piece of evidence. She had spent years infiltrating alien intelligence agencies and had obtained records showing the current conspiracy to eliminate human survivors. Even now, as we speak, there are agents from 6 different governments conducting raids to arrest or kill humans who have been identified, she said. This conspiracy is not ancient history. It is happening today. As if on cue, emergency alerts began flashing on communication devices throughout the chamber. Sarah Miller, monitoring the networks from the human colonies, was broadcasting live updates showing alien security forces surrounding human settlements on the Outer Rim worlds. But something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking the colonies, many of the security forces were laying down their weapons and refusing orders. The live broadcast of the council session had reached their personal communication devices, and they were learning the truth for the first time. Thomas watched as centuries of lies crumbled in real time. Alien soldiers who had been told they were hunting dangerous criminals realized they were being ordered to murder innocent families. Government officials who had believed the official history discovered they had been enforcing a massive cover-up. The question before this council is simple, Thomas said as his presentation reached its climax. Will you continue to participate in genocide, or will you choose justice? The vote was overwhelming. 437 council representatives voted to recognize humanity's survival and grant them full rights as a galactic species. Only 23 voted against, and most of those were from governments that had directly participated in the original conspiracy. Ambassador Vex Kane was arrested as he tried to flee the chamber. Within hours, arrest warrants were issued for dozens of other officials who had been involved in the cover-up. Some alien governments fell completely as their populations learned about their leaders' crimes. 6 months later, Thomas stood on the observation deck of a massive restoration ship orbiting Earth. The planet still looked damaged, but green patches were beginning to appear where atmospheric processes were healing the poisoned air and soil. Behind him, a group of young humans attended his weekly history class. These were children from the colonies who were finally free to learn about their heritage and their homeworld. The most important lesson, Thomas told his students, is that truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how deeply people try to bury it.